Welcome everyone, and thank you for being with me on this journey. I am Diana Popa, business coach. Thank you for subscribing to our channel. Today my special guest is Joanna. Joanna founded Flourishing Introverts to shift this extraversion bias in business using a simple but robust approach and to enable individuals to recognize their natural strengths so they can fulfill their potential without pretending to be something they are not. This starts with enabling introverts to identify and own their strengths, something Joanna does in her group coaching programs and one-to-one with clients. With her clear purpose and unshakable passion, she works with companies and organizations to help them recognize and encourage the contribution introverts can make to their business. This is diversity, equity, and inclusion in action. Welcome, Joanna. Thank you so much for being today with me.
You're welcome, and it's a pleasure to be here with you.
Tell us more about your story and how you started on this path to help introverts to acknowledge their strengths and really put themselves out there on the market the way they are, authentic.
So as a child, I always knew I was different. I would take myself to bed early to read rather than out playing late with other children. And as I got through into my teenage and early years in business, in employment, again, I knew I was different, but I didn't know how. And it wasn't until my 30s when I did the MBTI, the Myers-Briggs type indicator, that the results came back as an introvert. Now, I know a lot of people say Myers-Briggs, is rubbish, but for most introverts that I've met, reading that little paragraph for the first time, and feeling like for the first time you're understood made a massive difference to me because I recognized everything in that little description. But, and there is a big but here, what it didn't do was enable me or show me how to really play to those strengths. What it highlighted was how I was different to the extroverts. So then I had a game plan of, so in order to be more like them, in order to fit in and get on and be accepted, this is how I have to be. So I then spent the next probably couple of decades trying to be more extroverted in order to be accepted by my colleagues, in order to get promotions, etc. And eventually I hit introvert burnout, which many of us do, many people earlier than I did. And that was when I finally realized that actually I need to stop pretending. I need to stop enabling other people and encouraging other people to pretend. And what I need to do is really show introverts that there is a way to really have a great life and win in business by playing to our strengths rather than by pretending to be something we're not.
That's very inspiring. Thank you, Joanna. I don't know exactly what I am myself. I took many tests and I always came up as an extrovert. But listening to you, you don't seem and you don't look like an introvert. And this makes me doubt and makes me think, am I extrovert or not? What would you advise those who don't know what they are and maybe they are feeling like they are introverts? And how can they become successful?
Can I answer another question first?
Yes.
Is that allowed? So I think one of the things we need to get clear about, Bon, is what really is introversion and extroversion, because there are so many myths and misconceptions. So I go back to Jungian definition. I'm a big Jungian anyway. And what Jung described was it's about where we get our energy from and what drains those mental batteries. So for an introvert, we get our energy from quiet, from reflection, from solo activities, or in the case of my husband and I, what we call companionable silence. We can walk for ages and maybe not say very much, and then occasionally talk about a bird we've seen or a tree we're looking at, but we're not talking the whole time. And what drains our mental batteries is being in that busy, loud, noisy environment where we don't feel like we can connect with ourselves. The extroverts, on the other hand, get their energy from that very busy, loud, noisy environment. And what drains their batteries is long periods of silence, of quiet, of nobody saying anything. Imagine an extrovert working in a library. It would really kind of not work for them. And so that's the definition of introversion, extroversion, where we get our energy from. Behavior then sits on top of that. So provided I am resourced, provided my mental battery is topped up, I can do anything I want to do. You know, I've done a TEDx talk. I've emceed events of over 1,000 people. I run training courses for individuals and corporates, you know, pretty much every day. All I need to do is make sure that I'm looking after that mental battery. If I don't, then I can't do all of those things. So there are 6 different types of introverts. You know, there is a classic introvert, which is almost everything we would stereotypically think of an introvert. But then there are the extroverted introvert types. So these still need to recharge quietly or in a fairly reflective activity, but they can access some of the extroverted behaviors without feeling that battery drain. So I'm an open introvert, and I can, if you ask me how I'm feeling and what I'm thinking as you're experiencing now, I can share with you. But we have engaging introverts who are brilliant on stage, dynamic introverts who learn differently, you know. So there are so many, and of course combinations of those extroverted types. So it's not as simple as, and one of the myths is that introverts are shy and lonely and boring and depressed and stuck up and arrogant and all those things. None of those is true. We don't have social anxiety as a default. Some do, but then so do some extroverts. So it's not about the behavior. We can't always judge an introvert or an extrovert by their behavior. What we can do is understand where they get their energy from.
I love that. I really love that. Thank you, Joanna. And this actually makes me reflect on what I like. And actually, I'm a bit of everything. I like the nature, I like the silence, and I really like my moments when I am just alone, really in the creative space, in nature even. And I also like when I am surrounded by people. So maybe, I don't know if I'm a combination of the two, or as you mentioned, an introvert, which is who is open and who can be on stage and in front of other people. Is there a way we can actually identify precisely what type we are?
So I have a questionnaire that people can use, and it's at yourintroverttype.co.uk, and we can pop that in the show notes. But if you go to my website, you'll see access to it there. And you know, thousands of people have now taken it and found it incredibly helpful. And if you're an extrovert, the first 2 questions, if you don't answer those in the way an introvert would, it'll throw you out. So then you'll know you're not an introvert. So to answer your original question, it's about really, in order to be a success, it's about really understanding what your strengths are, making sure that you have good boundaries in place so that you can disappear when you need to top up those mental batteries, and really then play to those strengths rather than apologizing, rather than when people say, gosh, you're so quiet. I used to say, oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Now I say, thank you for noticing. I'm a great listener. And I find that by listening, I pick up so much more and can then quite often assimilate ideas or summarize. So thank you for noticing that. What a difference that makes.
Absolutely. You tapped into your potential and you acknowledge who you are and how you are feeling. And this is absolutely incredible. And I always say that we should be authentic in the way we teach, in the way we present ourselves. And I know that this is very difficult. And I believe that you are helping us to be authentic. Thank you so much. What do you think that organizations could actually do to develop this diversity regarding introverts and extroverts?
I think the first thing they need to do is be honest about where the extraversion bias exists in their organization, and it's everywhere that you look. So from the recruitment process through into the way meetings are called at short notice with an unclear agenda, or if any agenda at all, and then they're not chaired well, and they allow, the chairperson maybe allows 2 or 3 people to dominate the meeting. So introverts like me don't get heard, we don't get a chance to contribute. It's in career progression, it's in the promotion prospects, it's in problem solving. Recently in organizations, there's been a resurgence of this working out loud problem solving. That's great for extroverts, but not so good for introverts, because one of the other differences is the way we communicate. So introverts tend to have this think, say, think communication process. You ask me a question, especially if I'm prepared, I can probably answer fairly quickly. If I'm unprepared, I want to think about it so that the answer I give is my honest, genuine answer. But because of the pace of business and because we expect people to give answers immediately, then people will assume we don't have an opinion or that we don't know the answer and move on to somebody else. And because extroverts tend to have a say, think, say, you ask them a question, they'll give you an answer, make sense of it as they're talking, and then kind of go, oh, I didn't know I was thinking that, and maybe then talk a bit more. So business is geared up for that immediate, fast response. We don't value reflection. We don't value thinking time in business. It looks like people aren't working. We want to see them doing and talking and being busy. We don't recognize actually that there's so much business done when we're quiet, when we're maybe in flow, which is where we're undisturbed, and in that space where time seems to, get longer and longer. It's a fantastic place to be. But business is not geared up for that. Somewhere, someone decided that the extrovert ideal was what we needed in business. So introverts, like I was in business, are encouraged to speak up, push yourself forward, get out there more, make more of a thing, go networking more. Very few managers, and I did have a couple actually, but very few managers said to me, what is it that you really enjoy that you're good at? Let's help you do more of that. No, we're encouraged to be cookie cutters of the louder, noisier types. So business needs to say that if they're serious about diversity, equity, and inclusion, let's recognize where this bias is. Let's diminish it and maybe reduce it and eliminate it altogether, so that what we've got is a level playing field, because up to 50% of people identify as an introvert. So that's either 50% of people who are pretending to be something they're not, or up to 50% of people who we're not maximizing their potential because we don't know how to get the best out of them.
That's very impressive, Joanna. And I believe that this is going to take a while until our organizations are going to make this change in their mindset and completely shift in their culture. What do you think that introverts could do until then? Because exactly what you mentioned, in order to get a leadership position, in order to climb the ladder of the hierarchy, you need to be in a certain way. You need to say your ideas, you need to impose your views, and you really need to bring forward all the time your decisions on the spot. How can they actually act in this work environment and really be fulfilled at the same time?
I think there's a couple of really important things. It starts with owning your introversion and being proud of it. So not thinking it's a fault, which other people tend to think, not apologizing for it, but actually really owning those strengths, being proud of them. And then when you're in those busy situations like meetings, one of the techniques that I use that works really well is using something I refer to as a placeholder. So when somebody asks me a question, rather than just going into my thinking space and seeming like I don't have anything, I say something that keeps me in the conversation, that keeps me, the speaker, being heard. And it might be something as simple as, that's a really interesting question. And as I'm mulling it over now, I noticed that I have, there are 2 or 3 different ideas I have around this. So if I think about which one's most relevant now, all of the time I'm saying that stuff, my brain is frantically working out what's my true position. But it's almost like I'm letting people know my process so that they don't think I've just switched off or I've disengaged. So I think that's a really useful technique. And the other thing I think is really important is when we are given feedback, as we often are in business, about push yourself forward, speak up, all of those things, is to say, thanks for that feedback. One of the things I know about myself is that I'm an introvert, so that's not natural for me. What I really need to do in those situations is be able to do X. So rather than just either accepting the feedback and trying to pretend, or hearing the feedback and going, not going to do that, actually make it a conversation so that people stop pushing us to be something we're not.
I love that. Thank you, Joanna. This is really about owning who you are and really making it authentic and very natural. And as you mentioned, still having this engagement. What would you say is the biggest challenge for introverts nowadays, everywhere, in business, in career, in relationships, and how can they get out of that challenge?
I think the biggest challenge is the temptation to hide. So many introverts, because we've had these years and decades of being told be something different, we end up feeling not okay about ourselves. We think that we begin to believe that there might be something wrong with us, especially if we haven't yet realized that it's introversion. It's nothing nothing more than that. And so the temptation is to use introversion as an excuse to say, oh no, I could never give a presentation, I'm an introvert. Or no, I can never speak up in meetings, I'm an introvert. I encourage people to have that growth mindset. So for me, it's all about, I'm an introvert, so I haven't spoken on stage yet. But let me think about my development plan as to how I could do that. So for me, yet is a very important word, not never, not I could never do that, I'm an introvert. I'm an introvert and I haven't maybe been brave enough to do that yet, but let me work on how I could do that. And if people watch my TEDx talk, they'll notice it's quite different to other people's. It's very measured. I'm looking down quite a lot of the time, and you're told never to look down in a TEDx talk, because what I wanted to do was be authentic to my introvert self, even when I was on the TEDx stage, rather than comply with what we're supposed to do. So I'd say stop hiding inside or behind your introversion. Understand that if you can charge your batteries, you can do anything you want to do. And really then set your stall to what is it you want in life? Do you aspire to be a manager or a leader? And let's face it, there are some great introverted leaders. One person who I've become aware of quite recently as an introvert, and I don't think I realized until recently, is Simon Sinek. Now, he is great on the stage. He has a very powerful message. But there's a little YouTube clip of him talking about being a self-confessed introvert. And when he goes networking, he tags along with an extrovert who does most of the talking. And he kind of listens in and chips in when it's appropriate. Now, we would never necessarily think of someone like Simon Sinek as being introverted. Some of the great world leaders, Barack Obama was an introvert. Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, big, corporate leaders, introverts. So there is nothing that stops us if we choose not to hide, if we get out of our own way and actually say, this is what I'm going to do and here's how I'm going to do it authentically.
Thank you, Joanna. I am really inspired and I am passionate about your subject because this makes me reflect a lot. I would like to thank you once again for being with me today. And I would like to close our interview today by asking you, who are you serving and how can people contact you?
So the people who seem to be most drawn to me are women, typically mid-career, often in STEM and professional services. And one of the things that I'm doing is working with them to really help them to step up authentically and take that next position, which they know that they're more than capable of, but are often, and the words they use is that they often feel overlooked and undervalued. So they're the people that I'm really serving right now. And people can find me and my work at flourishingintroverts.com. And on that site, you'll find the questionnaire to find out what type of introvert you are. You'll find my TEDx talk. You'll find some of my musings. I have a podcast that people can access from there. So everything is in that one place.
Thank you so much, Joanna. I am also going to take the questionnaire because I am also curious about what I am actually. I have always been wondering. Thank you so much once again for being with me today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And for those of you listening to us, stay connected because there is so much more to come.